Hello, everyone. Last week we spent some time researching an element on the periodic table. And this week we are going to talk about atoms, molecules, elements, and compounds and the differences between them. Atoms are the basic building blocks of matter. We learned that from our What is Matter reading way back in September when we first started this unit. And we know that atoms are formed from those subatomic particles, protons, neutrons, and electrons. The electrons live in the orbits surrounding the nucleus, and the nucleus is made up of protons and neutrons. Molecules are two or more atoms bonded together. So some examples of that would be oxygen. There are two atoms of oxygen to make up the oxygen molecule. We have water. You guys might be familiar with the chemical name H2O. There are two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of oxygen in water. And carbon dioxide, one atom of carbon, two atoms of oxygen. And glucose, there are 6 atoms of carbon, 12 atoms of hydrogen, and 6 atoms of oxygen in glucose, in that molecule. And there are some other molecules pictured here. We can see oxygen. They've shown the atoms as circles with the chemical symbol in the middle there. So you can see those molecules bonded together. We are familiar with the periodic table at this point in our unit, and we know that different kinds of atoms are listed on the periodic table. Atoms that have different amounts of protons, neutrons, and electrons make up different elements. And we know that we can determine the amount of protons and electrons by looking at that atomic number. And to determine the amount of neutrons in an atom, we take the atomic mass and subtract the amount of protons. And here's our periodic table of elements, which we have been learning about for the past couple weeks, pictured there. Compounds. Molecules that have more than one type of atom are compounds. And some of the examples of that would be water, carbon dioxide, glucose, and ammonia. If we look at water, for example, we can see that it's made up of hydrogen and oxygen. So those are two different elements that are bonded together to form a compound. So here's our Venn diagram, just explaining the differences. We have our elements, and we know that elements or atoms, are the smallest amount of an element. Molecules are two or more atoms chemically bonded. And then we have our compounds, which are two or more different elements chemically bonded, like the example of water. Chemical formulas, I've been talking about chemical formulas in these slides, and let's just break it down so I can explain what these symbols mean. So we use the chemical symbol, meaning H for hydrogen and O for oxygen in the example of water. And we see a subscript there. That subscript tells us that there are 2 hydrogen atoms in one molecule of water. But you'll notice that there is no subscript next to the O for oxygen. When there is not a subscript, that means there is just one atom. Or if, for example, in water, there is one atom of oxygen in the molecule of water because there is no subscript listed. Here we have magnesium carbonate. So let's break down this chemical formula. We have magnesium, and there isn't a subscript next to magnesium, so we know that there's one atom of magnesium in magnesium carbonate. And we can look at carbon and see that there isn't a subscript next to carbon. So we know that there's one atom of carbon, but next to oxygen, there's a subscript of 3. So that means that there are 3 atoms of oxygen in magnesium carbonate. So let's look at a few examples and determine if they're an atom or molecule. So here we have carbon. Is that an atom or molecule? we have 2 atoms of carbon here. Is that an atom or molecule? Ammonia, 1 atom of nitrogen and 3 atoms of hydrogen. Is that an atom or molecule? And here we have sodium. The chemical symbol for sodium is Na. Is that an atom or molecule? Now let's look at a few examples and determine if they are an element alone, or a compound. So 2 or more elements bonded together. Here's our example. Is that an element or a compound pictured there? That's 2 atoms of carbon and 2 atoms of hydrogen. We've talked about water in this presentation. Is water an element or a compound? H2O. And here we have lithium, an element on the periodic table. Is it an element or compound?